Hey, everybody, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm Kelly Barrett, your host here at Etc. on the Vibe Live. Beyond thrilled today for my guest. We are in the midst of Canadian rock and roll royalty today, friends. The legendary Myles Goodwyn of April Wine is here with us today. Myles,
Hi,
thank you for joining us. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you.
Good, good. So, I heard you had a little tussle with Mother Nature on Friday out in Newfoundland.
Yeah. The Hurricane Larry
Yeah,
was threatening the show when I was there, so it canceled. And so after about 2, maybe 3 hours sleep, just turned around and came right back on the first flight. And then it did hit pretty hard that night, Friday night. So I saw the pictures on Saturday morning, so it was a good thing they canceled.
right. Yeah, I saw the pictures
Good
too.
thing for a good thing, but a bad thing too, because we went a long ways to play there. It was our first show in 2 years, and we were very keen to play, but didn't happen.
Right. So disappointing, but thank God everybody's okay.
Yeah, that's right.
And I hear they found a new venue for it. So will you be rescheduled at that event, Myles?
I don't think so. I
Right.
mean, the event's going on now, isn't it? I mean, I think it was originally 10 shows in a row, I think.
Right.
We were one of those nights, but we can't turn around and go back now. I don't think they'll ask us because it's just there isn't time. Maybe next year.
Right. And it was a sold out show. But
Yeah, it sold out in about 2 or 3 minutes.
I don't doubt it, Myles.
That's
I
what I'm
don't doubt
told.
it. But on the positive side of things, you have a show coming up in Edmonton, I believe at the Grey Eagle Event Center on the 18th of September.
So far, so good.
So far, so good. And one the night before in Calgary.
That's right, yeah.
And that would be at the River Cree Casino, I believe.
I think it is.
Yeah. Good stuff. Well, I'm going to be at the Calgary show, and guys, get your tickets. So, Myles, you are a musician, singer, songwriter, producer, author, and I would add humanitarian to that as well. We have a lot to talk about, and you've got some really cool new projects on the go that I would like to speak about. But, I have to say this right off the get-go, Myles. I have been infatuated with your voice since Electric Jewels. I think I was about 11 or 12 and stealing my older sister's albums. And even at that young age, I'm just getting that out there. I've had this unholy fascination with your voice. And so it's such a thrill for me to have you here on the show today. You recognized one of Canada's most performed songwriters on the radio. And I read this and I want to ask you, is it true that you wrote your hit song, You Won't Dance With Me, when you were a teenager?
Yeah, I did, yeah. I was playing in a high school band, and I wrote it at that time. Yeah, we performed it. We performed it back then. It was actually, as I recall, 2 songs. One was called "Why," and the other was "You Won't Dance with Me." So when I put them together, both songs came together for the final April Wine version. Yeah.
And where do you think you get that inspiration from at that young age?
Well, I mean, I love music long before that, since as long as I can remember. And when the Beatles came out, we all tried to sing and play like they did, and so that was natural for me to try and write songs. As a kid, as a young man, I guess the Beatles came out were in '63, and in a big way over here in '64, if I have the years right. And so that would be about that time. And I just wrote it. It was based on just experiences of being, on stage and watching the girl that I was interested, leaving with somebody else, because I was always, tethered to an amplifier kind of thing, and other experiences. But yeah, it was fun to be able to write that song. I don't remember performing it in the band, high school band, but I know when I wrote it. Yeah.
That's amazing to have that type of songwriting skills and technique at, in your teen years. I was just thinking as you were sharing that now, Myles, those girls that kind of blew you off probably wound up kicking themselves a little bit later. Look at you now, eh? Living well is the best.
I don't know about that.
Oh, wow. So, multiple platinum selling albums, Myles, countless acknowledgments, tons of acknowledgement at the Juno Awards. April 1 was inducted into the Canadian Music Hall of Fame in 2010. You yourself, Myles, received the 2008 East Coast Music Lifetime Achievement Award. You received the SOCAN National Achievement Award in 2002. But I have to ask, Myles, as far as, all the accolades and the recognition, above all, what would you say has been your greatest reward personally?
I mean, they're all really important. I don't know which is my favorite of those. I know the one that I really want that I haven't received, which would probably be the most important one to me. And I don't understand why I haven't received it. And that's to be in the Songwriters Hall of Fame, Canadian Songwriters Hall of Fame. I mean, I have lots of friends that have been deducted, and the first thing they say is, Myles, why aren't you here? I mean, this is ridiculous. And I kind of feel like the same way, I mean, I've been, writing songs. I've been on the radio since 1971, and I'm talking about hit songs. And to not be recognized still 50 years later, I don't understand.
There's something wrong with that.
There's something very wrong with that. And, I shouldn't, be talking like this maybe, but yeah, it is. Since you've asked the question, I'm 73 years old. And I was a young man when Fast Train hit the radios. And that was the first song of mine I heard on the radio. And that is a very, very long time ago. And when you think of all the hits of April Wine and the ones that I wrote, which was most of them, kind of odd that I haven't been inducted into that. I think that's the main thing, because I don't think of myself as a singer, even though you say those nice things. I only sang because I was in a band where I had to sing my own stuff. I would rather be Bernie Taupin than Elton John, So I wrote them and I sang them. And I didn't care for singing at first, but I got my head around that, and I finally understood that, I could sing okay. But, I want to be known at the end of my days as a songwriter. And that's the truth. I just want to be known as a songwriter more than anything. And that would be nice to be inducted into the Canadian Songwriters Hall of Fame. Where I don't know why it hasn't happened yet. Maybe it will one day. Maybe it won't. It's not, it won't be the end of the world if it doesn't happen at all.
Right. I don't understand that. I was looking at the April Wine website earlier, and there's 35 albums on there, for heaven's sake. There's 35 albums available on that website.
Yeah, a lot of compilations and greatest this and greatest that. But studio albums, I don't know. I think there might be 14 or something like that. I don't recall.
Right.
And then, in more recent times, with 2 blues albums, both of them award-winning and successful. And one of them, my first one, what was it, 4 years ago now or so?
Friends of the Blues.
Was nominated for Blues Album of the Year at the Junos. I mean, that tells me, because of the acceptance, and they were both in the U.S., all through the big, American cities in the U.S. in the top 40 for over a year. So it was a success, and I wrote everything. All the songs are mine, except 2 out of 2 albums. So. Yeah, again, it's just a songwriting thing. That's what I love. That's what I enjoy. That's what I do all the time. Back in the studio tomorrow, back in the studio the day after that, before I fly west. It's just to be in the studio creating new songs, new material. That's what I do.
Right. So songwriter first and singer second. And
and guitar players third, or whatever it might be.
Right. We're getting some comments in here. So Mark Gladstone, who of course is the keyboard player for Prism, is saying, "Hey Myles." Ricky Lamha is a huge fan, says, "Myles, I just want to thank you for all your great music over the last 50 years that I have enjoyed and still enjoy listening to." Musician Chris Knowles is saying, "Right on, Myles, huge influence." And going off of what Myles or what Chris just said, Myles, about you being a huge influence, I was thinking about, as I said, I've been listening to your music since I was just a young girl, and your ability to write songs that cover so many different moments and experiences and feelings in our lives. There's the ballads that people have fallen in love to. There's the rock songs that people have partied to. There's the songs that we've gotten over our heartaches to. Really just the soundtrack of a generation. And I wonder, what is it that you attribute to about your songwriting that just connects with such a huge, a nation, really?
I guess I think that most of the time I just try to, I write songs that I like, what I identify with, and often the lyrics mean something. And I'm not so different and unique that if I like something that other people don't like or don't feel the same way, you know what I mean? Like I'm like everybody else. So if something affects me and I write about it, they can identify it with it, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
And I mean, some of the stuff that I write for April Wine, are just rock and roll songs, period, flat out, and don't mean much except, they sound good and they got a good feel and all that. I mean, Roller is based on, which is a big hit for us. Roller was based on a fictional character that liked to gamble, a woman that liked to gamble. But I wrote that after my first time to Las Vegas.
Oh, great.
So, there's a connection there.
Right.
And so forth. But just trying to write from the heart, whatever the direction might be or the project might be, just do the best I can. And if I like it, maybe other people will. And it seems to work that way. Radio likes April Wine. And
they sure do
play April Wine, whether I wrote it or not. So that's just a blessing. I'm grateful for that. That's wonderful.
Absolutely. And, to have that type of longevity, here in Lethbridge, we have a local radio station that plays a high amount of Canadian content. And I think they play April Wine at least once a day. And, to have the songs that have captivated and like an entire generation, and to have them still have this type of longevity is that's not something that every artist out there can say that they can, still enjoy. And so, and I love that you're still creating and you're still taking on new projects. And it was only currently in the last current years that you did get interested in the blues. Is that correct?
In the blues?
The blues was kind of a more later.
Yeah, well, like I say, I think the first one, Myles Goodwyn and Friends of the Blues, came out in 2018.
Right.
I've liked the blues. I was a big fan of the blues. I don't have a blues record collection. I don't like everything blues. Here we go back to the songwriting. I've always liked, great, to me, a great blues song is a great song.
Right.
First of all, like The Thrill Is Gone by B.B. King is a great song. And I'm not really into great players that don't have much to say lyrically. They just want to be able to have some kind of vehicle to blow, to play. To play, show off on guitar or whatever it might be. I just like really good songs. So my big influence in the blues was a fellow named Taj Mahal, and I have one of his albums, his very first, I think it was the second one, called Natural Blues, that I still have the same vinyl. It's just worn, the cover's all worn out and everything. And I just love all the songs. I just like the songs. And the man is a brilliant singer and a brilliant writer and performer and player. He's got all of those things. But what captivated me was the songwriting. So when I decided to write a blues album, I just tried to write the best blues songs that I could. It wasn't about performing, playing, about the guitar licks and all the rest of that. It was just about writing a great song. And then I just contacted all these blues players across the country and some in the U.S. And I said, would you play on my blues record or what's the blues songs? And they responded positively. So I got a lot of great players on those two records, Myles Goodwyn, Friends of the Blues, and Myles Goodwyn, Friends of the Blues 2, which came out a year later. And the third one will be out next year. And it's a blues album called I Dream in Blue. So, yeah, I really enjoy writing songs, and blues songs is a lot of fun writing.
Right, right. And so I'm curious about your songwriting process, Myles. And I know there's a lot of musicians that are watching this show today. Do you mind sharing a little bit about what your songwriting process looks like for you? Does it generally start with a lyric, or is it a melody, or can it be different from song to
Well, I
song?
think most songwriters that are prolific, we have different ways, always, an experience, or just you're playing your instrument, whatever it may be, and hear something musically that kind of grabs your imagination, and leads you down a path, and you follow it. And usually I'll have lyrics in the beginning with a melody, and then I'll finish the lyrics later once I have the whole format together. And I'll massage the lyrics and the music together. And I also sometimes, those final things are part of what I learn when I do pre-production or I'm in the studio. And I'll try things in the studio, say, oh, it didn't quite work the way I thought it would, and then I'll change that, and eventually come up with something I'm happy with. But the whole process starts typically with me wrapped around an acoustic guitar. That's normally how it starts. And it's usually in the morning. I like to get up in the morning quite early, and with a cup of coffee, and I seem to be very, very clear in there. And I'll just sit and play something, and that's usually when a spark will happen. These days, and for some years now, so it can come from all different ways. And I think most songwriters know what I identify with that. Song I'm writing right now, and I'm in the studio for the next 2 days to finish it off. Is right now I've had the music for a while, and I'm just getting those lyrics to where I'm saying exactly what I want to say,
right,
and the way I want to say it. And then I'll take it to the studio the next 2 days and finish that whole process, and hopefully have something really nice at the end of it.
Right. I'm sure, and I asked that question because a lot of the viewers are musicians, and I'm sure everybody wants to write songs as well as Myles Goodwyn does. So, and the comments are coming in. Tim Rempel says, April Wine CDs play often in my taxi Saturday nights. Ian Morris, who's a friend of mine, local musician, says, I was lucky enough to open for April Wine in Inuvik a few years back. He's saying another classic Canadian band, as in the nicest rock stars you could ever hope to meet. Same as Streetheart Trooper, other Canadian bands, genuine people. And I find that with a lot of the Canadian artists, the ones that I've had on my show, there seems to just be this real camaraderie, amongst each other, and it seems to be a really supportive community. And do you find that with Canadian artists?
Yeah, I think so, for the most part. I live in Nova Scotia now. April Wine started here. I grew up in Nova Scotia. I'm back here, and I'm now again part of the local music community. And I've met a lot of people in the half dozen years that I've been back, that I didn't know before. I mean, and it's kind of funny that I didn't. And I hope I'm not rambling, but Matt Anderson is a wonderful artist. Anybody knows that man and knows what I'm talking about. Very powerful singer and songwriter and everything else, and performer. And I used to see him open for April Wine for years. And I show up 45 minutes before the show, and I kind of stick my head around and see who's on stage and kind of listen for a minute. And I remember seeing Matt. He's a big man with the long hair flying and the sweat going. And I said, boy, is he ever good? But that was the end of it. But now we're really good friends, and we perform together because we're neighbors. Matt Mingle has been around for years. I've known Matt since the 70s, and now we're buddies. I just saw him the other day at a celebrity golf tournament. We were both there as guests and things like that. So I really, really enjoy the community down here. There's so many great players in Nova Scotia. It's like crazy how many great players there are down here. So I'm becoming part of that community, and it's wonderful. But nationally, in Quebec, I didn't have that at all. I didn't really know anybody in Quebec. It's a very different place, and I was isolated. But as I travel around over all the years and knowing people like Trooper, you mentioned Trooper, which by the way should be have more recognition than they do in this country. It's just a shame that they're not in the Music Hall of Fame, either whether it's through the Junos or otherwise. But songs like Raise a Little Hell and Here for a Good Time, Not a Long Time, and others are just classics.
Classics, yeah.
They're absolutely incredible songs. I wish I had written them. And the fact that they're not as recognized as some of us, including is just a mistake. It's just wrong. And you got Honeymoon Suite and Glass Tiger, and many, 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 many Canadian artists that are wonderful. And we get to know each other, in passing. And from out west, of course, Chilliwack with Bill and so I've known them all for years, and they're good friends and lover boy and on and on and on and on. And we're always really nice to each other and respectful to each other. Whenever we meet, it's hugs and like, how you doing? I just ran into, I think it was Honeymoon Suite. Yeah, it was Honeymoon Suite. It was supposed to be playing in Newfoundland as well.
That's right.
I saw them just as they came in that night. We're all sitting there with long faces, and they walked in, and they said, "Oh, we just heard. We got to get a flight out of here." And I said, "Yeah, man, that's what we're doing right now. That's what we're doing the same thing." So there's a camaraderie and meeting and seeing each other on the road and in airports and everything else. I'm going to miss that when I retire, because I know I'll never see them again.
Right. I think this summer was such an amazing comeback after the last year of everybody, being isolated and stuck at home. And, there was a lot, and, unfortunately the one of yours that got canceled, but there was a lot of outdoor festivals. And, I think at some point we can only be grateful that, we didn't have to go through another summer with no live music and nobody performing. And I was fortunate enough to go to Rock the River 2021. And I really saw what you just described, Myles, was, I was fortunate enough to go with Bernie Aubin sort of backstage and meet a lot of the guests that I've had on my show. And exactly what you had just described, Myles, the camaraderie back there and the have a good show, buddy. And everybody's rooting for the next band that's going on. And it's something really beautiful to see, just the way the Canadian artists, they stick together and they support each other. And so personally, I'm so grateful. The whole COVID was obviously a nightmare for everybody. So
it still is. Let's be very clear. It's right here with us, and it will be a long time. We are so not out of the woods. I'm just hoping they don't shut down these gigs, April 1 shows that are happening next weekend. I mean, who knows? Everything's that way that we just don't know what's going to happen next. The next wave, the next surge, the next variant,
Yeah, so. For sure. And, the truth of the matter is during these times, we need music more than ever, so I sure do hope. And I want to go to the show in Calgary. So I sure hope that continues.
Yeah, it's ironic that, all through history, entertainment is what got us through everything else, through wars, through famine, through, stock markets, crashing, through every kind of catastrophe we've had in the civilized world and otherwise probably. It always go back to entertainment, whether it's music or dancing or comedy or some kind of theatrical stuff, just to take our minds away. With COVID, it was the office, shut us all down. Completely shut us down. So all of those things that we believe that music will always be there, entertainment will always be there. There were no more movies, no more live music, no more anything, shut down completely, 100%. That's remarkable and terrible for all of us, the listeners, the performers.
I would agree with you, Myles, and I would think the cost on just people's mental stability and their mental health and their,
we've kicked that can around for almost 2 years now. It's very, very true. You're absolutely right. Mentally, it's hard. I know I get depressed about it, and I know people that are very depressed about it. I have grandchildren and children, and I worry about the future, of course, right?
For
and
sure.
Not being able to see them when we weren't able to travel at all, and they were, a year there. It seemed like, or so, that we couldn't even be in the same place because we couldn't travel safely with restrictions and everything else. So pretty tough stuff.
Well, here's hoping for better times ahead. And, on a positive note, we're getting some more great comments here. So Gary Jones, who's actually a good friend of mine, he's a huge April Wine fan. And in fact, Gary's the one that gave me my April Wine t-shirt that I'm wearing just today for you. So he said he was thrilled to see April Wine in Lethbridge here in August 2017 with 38 Special outdoor grandstand show, beautiful 32-degree summer night. And he remembers you toasting the crowd, saying it used to be Jack Daniels and now it's apple juice. So he's saying cheers to you on that. Steve Johnson is saying greetings from Little Rock. James Beaudry Music is saying sending much love, Myles. Thank you for all the music. Just so many positive comments here. So many people were thrilled about this show. And Myles, you wear several hats because you are also an author, and you have a couple of books out. So in 2016, you released your memoir named after another one of your hit songs called Just Between You and Me, which became an instant bestseller on the Globe and Mail's nonfiction list.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. And my question for you is, was it difficult to be so vulnerable in your memoirs, to...
It was. There were, some of it was very hard to write. So as a matter of fact, I took a break from it and wrote another book in the process. I was maybe halfway through Just Between You and Me, and it was so difficult to write some of it that I decided that I'd just take a break. But I processed up 5:30 in the morning, let's say, or 6 o'clock, and writing for 2 or 3 hours, and back to bed for a little bit, then get on with my day. I miss that routine so much that I wrote a book called Elvis and Tiger, which is fiction. Very good response to that, with a nice blurb on the cover from Alan Doyle. He's written some wonderful books, and so it was difficult to write. Some things in my life, with my mother dying at age 11, and other things that they're hard to recall, let alone put down in words. But I felt it was important. You don't write everything. You don't write everything that you could. Just wouldn't be right. But I wrote what I thought was of interest. I say at the beginning of the book that I wrote this for my children. I didn't write this for you. I didn't write it for him or her or anybody. I just wrote it for my kids. I wanted my family to know what I've been through, because I was never around. I was always on the road. I missed a lot of stuff growing up. And they were, and I was divorced twice. So writing about those kind of things is very, very hard. But anyway, I wrote it for my kids so they would know. And the other thing, I wrote it because there was a lot of misunderstanding of what happened with April Wine, and I never said anything ever about it. I just, no comment kind of guy.
Yeah.
But I heard lots of stuff that wasn't true, and I wanted to, correct
Set the record straight. Set the record straight.
I did, yeah. And it was good, because what I did in my book was I was able to talk to other members of April Wine or other people that were there and get their perspective. So folks reading the book wouldn't think, oh, that's just Myles making crap up or saying something that isn't true. No, Brian Greenway was in the band since 1977. And I talked to people that knew, that were involved with April Wine before that even, and so forth. So I always had a backup. So it wasn't just my word against somebody else. Because sometimes, they would say, well, I can be as candid as I want here now. It's in the book. They would say, oh, well, why isn't Jerry Mercer in the band? Why did he go? And I explain it. I explain it, and I get perspective from other people, including Brian Greenway, on that particular issue. And there were a number of times I had to set the record straight, as you say, and in a nice way. Nothing was malicious in my book. If you read it, whether it was against an ex-wife or an ex-member in the band, there was nothing malicious. This wasn't a drive-by shooting here. This was just as it is, and being kind as I could be, and understanding as I could be, and it wasn't a sour grapes. I was accused of sour grapes a long time ago. I wrote a song called Rock and Roll's a Vicious Game, and which did very well. And a lot of the critics at the time were saying, oh, that's just Goodwyn the sour grapes because they haven't won a Juno or whatever the hell they were.
Whatever.
It wasn't like that at all. It was just a kind of some words thinking about how some of us weren't so lucky in this business, succumbed to some of the trappings. I mean, Elvis Presley, hello, and many others, Janis and the rest of them. It's just,
Right.
But more important in that song, and the part that I really liked about the song was that I wrote about people, just ordinary people that love music more than anything in the world, that wanted to be musicians, and it didn't work out. No matter how hard they tried, it didn't work out because of bad breaks, or they just didn't have the talent or whatever. But they tried so hard, and it didn't work out. And I thought that was cruel. On some level, it was cruel. It's too bad we couldn't all have our dreams come true.
Right. What a beautiful sentiment, Myles. And that what you were just saying about the song, I never would have taken it for sour grapes. To me, it always personified the hard road that is rock and roll.
That's all it was. But the way critics can be.
For sure.
They can be just nasty. They'll look for any kind of opening for a body punch.
Right. But back to the book there, like fans loved that book. And I read some reviews, and, what you had just explained, Myles, that you didn't feel the need to be vicious, or I read a comment about just exactly that, how gracious you were when you were referring to ex-wives or tricky situations, that there was, it was done with class and taste. And one of your fans said that it was compulsive reading for any April Wine fan. And another fan had this to say, this really kind of touched me, Myles. She said, when I started this book, I was depressed. And I guess because I listened to a lot of April Wine, reading this book felt like a friend sharing their story with me. And then she goes on to say, I kept my mind off things and I couldn't wait to pick it back up. Myles lays it all out in the open for us. And then she goes on to say, he's classy, down-to-earth guy. And I felt like I had a friend while I was reading this book. Wow. That's got to feel.
Thank you. Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah. That's wonderful. People were so kind to when the company that HarperCollins that published the book, when they asked people for what they call a blurb, say something nice, they could put it on the inside the cover, pages. There were 23, I think, blurbs.
Yeah.
Everybody from Alec Lifeson and Rush to industry people, to some sports people, saying absolutely wonderful things, and that's really nice. It just it really shocked me that so many people would say so many kind things. So.
Right. It goes back to that supportive community. And when something's good, it's good. And the book was clearly good. And I'm just curious, Myles, was it a natural progression to go from songwriter to author? Or was it?
No, I suppose. I don't know. As an artistic person, I do things that are connected somehow. Obviously my memoirs connected to everything I did musically. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Martin Malyuich that helped me with this book. I'm a horrible research guy, and I'm not good with technology, as you probably realized before we came on the air, with a little confusion.
We got it figured out, Myles.
To get it figured out, I was like, what? But Marty knows more about the Canadian music industry than anybody. So many industry people ask Marty to write their programs or their speeches, whether it's the Junos or the Canadian music industry people or whoever it might be. He's written books. He's written at least, geez, Marty, if you're watching this, I'm sorry, at least 8-10 books on the Canadian music industry. So I said to Marty, I said, can you help me with this book? Because, I'll talk about playing with, Neil Young in Europe in 1979, but I don't remember any of the details of the events so much. This is just one example. And he's great at finding it. He'll get on there and he'll say, oh yeah, this happened. And things about the Canadian context, CRTC ruling, which came out, I think, in 1969. And do you know what that is? Or I'm sure you know what the CRTC ruling is. With 30% Canadian content ruling that came in, which friends like Brian Adams doesn't agree with. But so many of us agree with it because it gave us the opportunity to establish some kind of Canadian star system here. We didn't have recording studios. We didn't have publishers and managers and all of these kinds of things. It was all American or primarily. So all of a sudden, because of Share TC ruling, we were able to get some airplay and generate money and create an industry and a star system. We never had it before. So how anybody can see anything wrong with that, I don't know. But anyway, it doesn't matter. Brian Adam called me a little while ago about supporting him on something that he was doing, and I was glad to throw my hat into the ring.
Nice.
But yeah, I'm kind of losing track of where we started off in this thread. But what were we talking
That's okay,
about?
Myles. No,
Oh,
it's okay.
Mark Milius. Thank you, Marty, for everything you did on my book, because it wouldn't be nearly as good. So when people read the book, not only do they hear, about April Wine and songs and things like that and gigs, but they also get a little history on the Canadian music industry, just enough to make it, I think, very interesting. So the book would be nearly as good. The rest of the book I wrote myself. All that, the rest of the stuff are my words. Yeah.
Right, nice. And guys, check out the book. You can find all things Myles Goodwyn on his website, which is scrolling at the bottom of the screen. I love it. I love that it's creativity just oozing out a different pore. I think when you make the transition from music to writing books, it's just just a different outlet for creativity.
Yeah, the other thing too is as I paint and I don't mean fences, I mean like paintings. And there are a lot of great musicians that are great painters. Geez, I mean, so many of them. Well, McCartney paints, and Ron Wood is a great painter, and so many. And I guess it's just because that artistic part of them, just one thing leads to another, and they want to
Right.
create. And
That's
I
right.
did the same thing. I wanted to create. Like I have a new record coming out. I don't know exactly when it's coming out. It's called Long Pants. And the cover, which I've just designed, is one of my paintings.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, and as the basis, the main part of the cover. So it's just a creative side to it. So I'm just starting on my third book now, and it's just a fun process. I hope I can get it finished.
Can you tell us what it's called? Is there a title yet for the third
Yeah,
book?
it's called Screeched.
Screeched. Well,
Screeched.
that's definitely Nova Scotia sounding material there, my friend.
Yeah.
Right on. There's another interesting project that you're involved in that really kind of touched me when I read about it. Can you tell us a little bit about your Soulful Caring campaign, Myles?
Yeah, the Soulful Caring is something I put together to collect shoes or gently used footwear to distribute to the people that are homeless. And I started this with a doctor, Dr. Van Dyce, and he and I were talking about, because I'm a diabetic and runs in my family. I have two brothers and two of the three of us have diabetes. My youngest boy, who's 26 now, was diagnosed diabetic type 1 when he was 6. I've got aunts and uncles who just had our DNA, unfortunately, and I'm a diabetic. And we were talking about the diabetics, the homeless people that are diabetic, and they're most vulnerable to the elements when they're outside, of course, cold and all the rest of it. So, and the idea of anyone being out there without proper foot care, with cold feet, these cases. But if you're diabetic and you cut yourself, you see your feet in particular, you'll very likely end up losing a limb. And these days, when you see a person without a leg, it's quite often related to diabetes. And so we realized that there was doing studies and checking stats to see how many people are out there homeless that are vulnerable and without proper footwear. I mean, if you've ever seen anybody on the streets, you probably can attest to that. So we started collecting shoes right across the country and worked with some good people, including Value Village and Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation and people like that. We generally collect about 5,000 pairs of shoes and boots for men and women, and distribute them to shelters somewhere across the country.
Right. What a wonderful cause, Myles. I love that. I volunteer with one of the missions here in town, and it is a real thing. They call it street feed. And it was a health concern that I never knew anything about until this. And there's some local doctors here in Lethbridge that donate their time to provide foot care to the people in the shelters and whatnot. So hats off to you, my friend. I think that's wonderful that you would just possibly use your platform and your status. We
did that very successfully. We haven't been doing very much lately, and there are reasons for that, and it's something that we have to pick up our pace on that. There could be it's not easy to do something like we were trying to do when you have no help. Like I found that I was mainly because the doctor's too busy. Like he's one of God's, people here to help save lives and everything else on a day-to-day basis. That's not me. So, but I could do I could do this with Soulful Caring, and I was doing it all the time, 7 days a week, constantly on the phone, organizing, arranging, that I had no time for anything else. No time for anything else at all. So I just had to cut back because I had music and books and a life and family, and I was completely preoccupied with Soulful Caring. And so I just took a break from it. And then anyway, I don't want to get into the business side of it, but there were certain complications that came along that have to be straightened out. But it is such a good cause. It is such a good cause. Forget about Soulful Caring for a minute. If anybody out there has shoes and can take them to a mission or a shelter or anything like that, along with, of course, food or clothing or anything else, but boots and shoes is what I was specifically looking at. Please do so, because it is so important, and it absolutely saves lives. It does. And so we're coming into the winter season again in Canada.
Yes.
And this fall weather and then the winter. This is especially this is when I ran the campaigns. Right now, right about now. But yeah.
Yeah, great advice. Yeah, viewers, if you're watching, most of us have old coats and boots. And
that's right. We don't like the color. We don't like the style. They don't fit us anymore. We have too many. Just take them. Don't throw them in the garbage. Take them down to the shelter. Give them to somebody that can use them, that needs them. It's life and death. It literally is.
I was just going to say, Myles, it literally is life and death for some of these people.
It totally is. Yeah. Yeah.
Great. And, I'm really glad that we talked about that, especially, with the onset of winter just around the corner. And
yeah, absolutely.
Right. And now back to a couple more comments before we wrap things up here. So local musician Sheldon Shukaliak says, thanks for all the great music, Myles. I always enjoyed seeing you live. First time at Edmonton Klondike Days, then Reds nightclub and Lethbridge, all in the same week. Kudos to your career. James Baudry says, thank you for being you, an inspiration to so many. You're truly one of a kind and a true gem to Canada. So many comments here. Eva Smith, who is a great fan of the show, says, April Wine and Streetheart are two of my favorite bands from my youth. Thank you so much for being the music that defined my life. Mr. Nice. Thank you, Eva, for your comments and your support of the show. Mr. Goodwyn, I just want to say you are the voice of so many generations. It's a true pleasure and honor to see you perform and hear your true one-of-a-kind voice and style. So lots of comments coming in, Myles. One question for you before we wrap it up here. Yeah, you are obviously showing no signs of slowing down anytime soon. So aside from the third book, is there anything else that you see for coming down the future? If you could wave a magic wand, any new projects to tell us about?
Yeah, sure. Well, I did mention Long Pants.
Yeah.
That's a solo album, and I call it Long Pants because the idea that adults wear long pants and children wear short pants. And this is something I've been working on for 42 years. And I'm finally getting it done. It's a personal album. It's an adult or mature album.
Right.
I have songs about living. I have songs about dying. I have happy songs and sad songs. Songs for every one of my children. Song for my partner. I have a drinking song. One about kittens. It covers all kinds of things. it covers a couple of very serious issues with regards to the Native American and Native Indigenous people in Canada, and really North America for that matter. And one of them I released to radio about 4 weeks ago now, and I have about 60 stations on it across Canada right now, and it's called "Some of These Children, They Never Grew Up," and this is about the unmarked graves that have been discovered in recent times of Indigenous children. And I have a song about the missing and murdered Indigenous women in this country, and that's called "Darling, Where Are You?" And both of these songs I wrote because my partner, my life partner, Kim, is Native. She's Sioux Assiniboine, and her children are Native, an extension of my family. So what affects them affects me.
Right,
And
of course.
so I see the tears and I see the concerns and everything first, like right where I live. And so that's why I respond to these. That's just how I respond to anything. You know,
Right.
in all of my life, I've never really wanted to get into politics and religion. I just leave them alone. It's a kind of a lose-lose. Go down those roads, and I don't really want to muddy the waters with my thoughts around those kind of things. It doesn't even matter. It doesn't matter at all. So I stay away from it. But in this case, in these two cases, I felt I had something to say. And with some of these children that never grew up, you can see on YouTube, you know, right now, if you want. And this is a song that was written by Jim Henman and I. And Jim and I have known each other since 1963, and we started April Wine together, Jim Henman and I. And we still perform in my trio. It's called Myles Goodwyn Trio. We do with 20, 30 shows this year. And in the Maritimes, when it's allowed. Anyway. So that's that album, Long Pants. I say I've been working on it since 1942. I mean, for 42 years.
Right.
And my daughter was born. A song about her the night she was born. I came home from the hospital, right from the hospital, wee hours of the morning. She had just been born, and I went into my studio at home and I wrote a song called "Forever Amber," and then I went to bed. And I finally got to record it, and 42 years later, folks, not one note, not one word has changed since the time I sat down and wrote it, because I nailed it. I got it right first. I didn't have to go back and fix it. There was nothing to fix. It was one of those things that was very pure.
But I think when it comes right from the heart, Myles, I think there's no corrections needed. If it's, you know, like when you're writing just from the heart about what you're going through in that instant, you know, it's just going to be genuine and just the way it's supposed to be. And
yeah, but it doesn't always work out that way.
Is that right?
I'll tell you, it doesn't. Remember, the heart doesn't mean it comes like that. It's perfect. I've never experienced it in my life. I've had songs that come quickly, though. Just between you and me, came very, very quickly, but not like this. Nothing in my experience ever came like first time done. I didn't sit there for 3 or 4 hours. I had no sleep. I spent about half an hour putting it down and walked away. 42 years later, it's the same thing. That's new to me. Maybe it's happened to others. I don't know. But anyway, the album will be coming out. It's in the fall, or it's going to be early next year. I'm not sure. I'm just kind of wrapping it all up now.
Right.
We'll see how it goes. Aside from that, and I have the book Screech that I'm working on now. Aside from that, I have a new blues album coming out next year, absolutely, called I Dream in Blue. And the other thing is April Wine. I spoke to the guys in April Wine. I said, "You want to do a new record?" And they say, "Yeah." And I said, "Okay, well, I want to try. I want to start the writing process and see if I can come up with something that's worthwhile, because of COVID, I have the time."
Right, of course, yeah.
That's why I just have the time,
Yeah.
and I have to keep doing something like that.
You go crazy.
I go crazy. So
yeah, I hear that.
So that's already started, and I really like how that's going, and I hope to have that out, a new April Wine studio album next year. So.
Well, that's exciting news for everybody, Myles. I'm sure that's exciting news for me, for sure, and everybody that's tuned in today. We can't wait to see what you got coming next. And It has been such an honor to speak with you, Myles. I cannot tell you what an honor and pleasure it's been on behalf of all of us. We're proud to call you a fellow Canadian. We thank you for your stellar contribution to the Canadian music industry. The songs we fell in love with, healed our broken hearts to, partied the night away, and celebrated life with. Your music has really been the soundtrack of a generation, and we just thank you from the bottom of our hearts.
Yeah. Oh, you're welcome. And I have to thank everybody that supported April Wine and myself all these years.
Yes.
Without that, of course, being obvious, but we would have nothing. So it's mutual respect and gratitude.
Right on. Thank you so much, Myles. I really appreciate you stopping by. Continued success, great health, and best of luck in everything that you do. And you are welcome to come back here anytime. Thank you so much for being here today.
Okay, Kelly. Stay safe always.
You as well.
Okay.
Take care, Myles. Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in today. Wow, what an excellent interview. Beyond thrilled to have been talking with Myles this afternoon. Next week, Stone Poets will be here. And so you're going to want to tune in for that. I'm Kelly Barrett. Thank you again for tuning in. Until we see you next week, stay safe and sane. Be nice to each other. Bye-bye.